Hello, everyone. My name is Tanda, all the way from South Africa, coming to you live at the Leeds Town Hall. It's an exciting today, and please allow me to extend a warm welcome to everyone who's joining us here today. Please welcome to the Opera North Resonance work in progress sharing of Supriya Nagarajan. I hope I did not butcher that with my South African accent. So it's Supriya Nagarajan's resonance sharing today, which is quite an incredible thing. So first and foremost, in case you're wondering what the Resonance is, Resonance is a program that is run by Opera North annually, and it actually offers an opportunity to minority ethnic professional musicians and composers. It is quite really diverse in the way that it works, but it offers people the opportunity to collaborate with one another, as well as to collaborate with people from different disciplines and across various genres. So today we are very, very delighted and excited to see what Supriya and her collaborator, Shash Trevett, an amazing poet, have in store for us today. They've been working with different exceptional musicians, and today is no different. We have Mark joining them today, Mr. Mark Layton, and he told me to do it like this, Mark Layton Bennett with the hand, okay? So this is going to be an incredible experience. We hope that you really do enjoy it. So without any further delay, please, ladies and gentlemen, wherever you are, put your hands together for Supriya, Mark, and Shash.
Thank you. Thank you for the fantastic introduction, Tanda. That was wonderful. And yes, you got the name right. It's Supriya Nagarajan. So that's great. So just as a brief introduction, I thought to start off this afternoon's residency, the first thing I will do is to introduce myself and my co-collaborators working with me today so that you have an idea of what we do and what our practice is all about. My practice is set in South Indian classical music. I have been learning the art from the age of 5. I veered from the path of music, went into a bit of accountancy, ignore I said that, and then come back to music. So I came back to music, and then music is my full-time career now. And I'm also the artistic director of Manasa Mitra, based in Dewsbury. And the Resonance Residency was a fantastic opportunity for me to explore an idea. In January 2020, I was in Tamil Nadu on a visit. I belong to Tamil Nadu in India, although I grew up in Mumbai. And I thought it's a great opportunity to look at some temple complexes in and around Tamil Nadu. And as I was walking in Srirangam, which is one of the biggest temple complexes in India, in South India, I noticed some writing on the walls. And it was Tamil, but I couldn't really read it because it was very old Tamil. So obviously it was a script that had gone out of circulation. The script had changed and morphed over the time, and this script was no longer in a language that I could read and interpret. So that set me thinking about identity, culture, language, and also colloquial usage of the language, because the language that I speak may be different to the language that is even currently spoken in Tamil Nadu, because even from the time that I have emigrated to the UK, the language has changed slightly. So that sort of set a chain of thought and motion in my head. And I came back, and it was locked down, and I spotted the residency opportunity, and it was almost the perfect opportunity to explore this whole question of language, identity, lyrics, and song and music, and do it through song and music. That's the medium I know, so do it through song and music. And the first person who came to mind was Shash Trevett, my co-collaborator who's here in front of you today. And the reason was that Shash had written a beautiful poem when we did a previous project with the Huddersfield Contemporary Music Festival. And that poem had somehow touched the chords of my heart, because it was about planting. It was about rice, which is the staple crop of South India. And I could feel that resonance, as you would say, in Sash's poem and my thought process. And I thought of Sash and I said, I called her and I said, Sash, what do you think? I didn't even tell her enough about the project or anything. I said, Sash, what do you think? I think this is a great opportunity for us to work together. Can I actually put in an application? It was all done in a rush, and Sash didn't read the application. She wasn't horrified afterwards. She'll tell you that, but I had a brief conversation, and the application went, and the rest is history. We are here. Thank you very much to Opera North for selecting this project as one of the resonance residencies. And so we are here, and we have done some work. It was lockdown, remember? So what happened was that we couldn't sit in a room and actually explore these ideas together as you would normally do. So a lot of the work or the exploration or the talking or the thought process was all done remotely on Zoom. So we were just two tiny little boxes on a screen. But the conversations we had were phenomenal. I learned a lot. I'm sure Sash will tell you she did as well. And the other thing that happened was that apart from just this exchange of knowledge, there was also an appreciation for each other's art form, because although Sash wrote poem, it wasn't something that I naturally took and converted into song. I didn't make that poem into music. I actually went with my own lyrics and penned it, but the thought processes melted and moved, and you'll see a little bit of all that as we actually demonstrate that to you shortly. But just to give you an introduction of the kind of music I sing, I thought it'll be really good for each of us to sort of demonstrate our own little musical practices, and in Sash's case, her poetry practice. And then we go back to talking about the project. Is that okay, Sash, Mark? Okay. So I will use my very intelligent drone machine app on my phone. Before, it used to be a long instrument called the Tanpura, all dispensed with because you can't carry it anymore. So it's the app on the phone now. So a traditional Carnatic song that I would sing would go something like this. Neerajadala nayana Hare Krishna, Neerajadala nayana Hare Krishna, Neerajadala nayana Neerajasanade Vandita Dwaraka Nilaya Sukuna Bharana Hare Krishna, Neerajadala nayana Gopi Janajara Govardhanodhara Gopala Krishna Hare Hare Krishna, Neerajadala nayana. So that's the sound world that I come from, very Carnatic South Indian vocals. And I'm going to let both Mark and Sash introduce their worlds to you before we introduce the world we have created together. Over to you, Mark.
Hello, I'm Mark Leighton Bennett. As you can see, I'm a percussionist and a drummer. I'm normally a kit drummer. Play with Jar Wobble and the Invaders of the Heart. up until fairly recently, I used to tour nationally and internationally. Obviously, because of the pandemic, I've been a delivery driver for the past year, which is a fate that a lot of fellow musicians and performers and entertainers have had to endure. But I'm delighted to be here, introduced by Supriya. I've worked with Supriya before in Mumitra, both on educational basis in schools, and also recently these podcast recordings. Again, we've been working remotely, so sent me the podcasts. I've been adding percussion in the studio and throwing the kitchen sink at everything, basically. But yeah, so it's amazing to actually be in a room with other people performing, because it's been quite a while. Yeah.
Do you want to play for us a little bit, Mark, just so we know your world? Fabulous. Sash?
Hi, I'm Shash Trevett. I'm a poet and I translate Tamil poetry into English. I don't write in Tamil, I write in English. And so when Supriya called me, she originally had the idea of using a very old form of Tamil meter called Yapu to do this residency. And I immediately said, oh, you know, I don't write in Tamil and it's going to be quite hard to move a meter from one language to another. But we spent some time exploring that before discounting it, thankfully for me. I've really enjoyed this residency. It's been really good fun to work with Supriya. We've bounced ideas off each other. We weren't able to meet. I would write something and then we'd talk about it and it would change. It's funny how in the end the music and the words haven't gone together, but as you'll see in this performance, music is so much part of the songs I've written. So no, it's been really good to explore what it means to be Tamil, because although we're both Tamil, Supriya's from India and I'm from Sri Lanka, and actually we discovered that it means completely different things to be Tamil from those two countries. So yeah, hope you enjoy our event today.
Do you want to read a piece
yes,
of poetry, Sash? I know you released a collection recently.
I've just brought out a pamphlet, and this is just one of the poems from it. I write a lot about the Sri Lankan War, which again has come into this residency. We couldn't really get away from it. So here's a poem that I've written. Things happen. When they pepper neighborhoods with imported mortars and expansive tank fire, when they go from house to house lining up girls, women and men in revenge or on a whim, when they shut down substations and impose curfews and travel embargoes so that market sellers face ruin, when people go unfed, unwashed, and scavenge for scraps, when they shoot blindfolded men in the back and take souvenirs of mutilated lives and hopes, when they rape girls and grandmothers and celebrate the hecatomb of their success. Things happen, and the world moves on.
Thank you for sharing that, Sash. That was a very poignant poem. And yes, you are absolutely right. Both of us, although we speak the same language, Tamil, or we have done in the past, still our experiences are quite different, as we will discuss. I think it's fair to say that let's now discuss how we came to the point where we have actually made work that is slightly different to the Yappo meter that we set out to do. So, as far as my experience or my memory of our initial stages of our collaboration goes, I think we discounted the idea of working with Yappo poetry partly because of the metering and partly because it was narrowing our vision down to just one thing. So one of the things we both initially straight away thought about was to expand the horizon and look at things look at the bigger picture, so to speak. And I remember we looked at Tinai, and then finally we started to look at work songs. And there was a lot of commonality amongst the cultural work songs, both in Sri Lanka and in Tamil Nadu. Would you say that's about right, Sash?
Yeah. I think because if we just go back a few steps, when we looked at Tinai, classical Tamil poetry is written in a very formulaic way using 5 major landscapes. And each landscape has its own flora and fauna. And you can chart where a relationship is depending on what the poet decides to use within a set landscape. And the work songs that we then moved on to are also located within these ancient Tamil landscapes. So although one is high poetry and one is used by people in their everyday lives, there was a meeting in our thought processes which led to the work songs.
Absolutely. And I think arriving at that point, I started to interrogate my own memories of work songs, my own, and started to do a lot of research on work songs. And talking about work songs, I realized that, for example, one of the first occupations we looked at was fishing. And when we looked at fishing, we realized that the kind of work songs was a universal thing. So anywhere where there were fishermen fishing and the traditional methods were used, there were some form of metered work songs. And I happened to read an article in The Guardian which highlighted a radio station in Tamil Nadu, Kadalosai FM. And when I read the article, I made contact with the lady who was one of the DJs, RJs in the studio. And the one thing that she said to me really stuck in my head, even when I was composing. And what that was she said there was a reason why there were work songs. So what happened was a group of fishermen went out into the waters on their boat. And they had these large, really huge nets that they had to cast and let the fish actually come in and get trapped and then pull it back. And all this had to be done in a very smooth motion. They had to do it in a very synchronized way, otherwise the net would get tangled and the fish would escape. And so these work songs actually had a purpose to them. And for me, that was an eye-opener. I didn't know this before. And I have heard the work songs in different languages all over India, wherever there's a coast. And of course, there is coastlines all over India. But what I hadn't realized was there was a reason why these work songs existed. Because the fishermen could then sing in a synchronized way, cast their net, trap the fish, and pull the net back. And now for me, that was a great point to actually compose something. And it was that whole gentle movement of the net, the synchronized throwing of the net into the water, and the whole fishing community, working together to actually catch the fish. Actually, if you would like to, you should look up the radio station, because not only does it work as a sort of fishing broadcast, but it also works as a community service radio station. So they have been putting out a lot of COVID messages recently. They've been saying, please go out and have yourself vaccinated, please look after yourselves, wear masks. I mean, it's really good that a radio station, a tiny radio station in the furthest corner of South India, actually does a service that is very important for that fishing community. Sustainable fishing. They have all these messages. And I've since been actually listening to the radio station. It's quite soothing. It's like listening to radio for shipping forecasts, weather forecasts. It's really very musical. And if you listen to the podcasts, which we will be releasing shortly, the first podcast, which is on fishing, will also have sounds from both Kadalosa FM and radio for fishing, fishing weather broadcasts. So, we have integrated that into the podcast, and that's been done by Duncan Chapman, who's worked with me to mix and master and actually add the sounds to the podcast. But that was a little bit of a brief background on where my thought processes started in terms of the fishing song composition went. I also listened to some wonderful Bollywood songs. It's known as Collywood, because it's in the south. It's not Bollywood. So there are different woods in India. There's Tollywood and there's Bollywood, and there is Hollywood, and everything is about a wood. But this is the Tamil version. And I was listening to some songs which was set in a fishing community. And one of the songs that really inspired me was to do with a description of walking on the sand in the moonlit night. And that really was a good, even though it didn't directly relate to the fishing community or the work songs, that song and the melody really inspired me. I thought I'll share a snippet. And we're going to do that through this live telecast today. We are going to share snippets, poetry, and a little bit of percussion, and they'll all come together and go out, and we'll tell you a story. So that's the sort of format of what we are planning to demonstrate today. It's demonstration. We haven't perfected or finished all the pieces. This is more a work in progress, and we hope this will go further. So I'm going to share with you the song that I heard and I was inspired by to think of while I was doing my own composition as well. So Moongil Thotam to follow. Moongil Thotam Mooligavasam Niranj Maunam Ni Paadum Geetham Paurnami Iravu Pani Vizhum Kaadu Ottayadi Paadai Un Kooda Podinadu Idu Podum Enakku Idu Podume Verenna Venum Ni Podume Idu Podum Enakku Idu Podume Verenna Venum Ni Podume Moongil Thotam Mooligavasam. So that was a beautiful melody from the film Kadal, if you want to look it up. It was made in 2016. And it was set in a fishing community, so it's all about the beach and how the fishing community feel about their life at sea and the life away from sea, and the difficulties and troubles as well. I mean, we all know that the fishing communities across the world are having difficulties. So this was from the south of India. And Sash then wrote a poem, which she'll read out soon. But in the poem were two words, Elelo Ailasa. Now, it's a very colloquial way of actually bringing the sea into the song. And, you know, Elelo Ailasa is a traditional cry, or, that's the syllables used by fishermen throughout India, and especially in the south of India and in Sri Lanka as well. So it was very important that I used the words Elelo Ailasa in my composition as well. So I'm going to sing a little bit of the composition so you have an idea of what the composition sounds like. I've sung the whole composition in the podcast, so of course the podcast is quite extensive. So after this, if you want to go and listen to the podcast, which we'll be releasing shortly, you can do that as well. But I'll give you a little taster of Elelo Ailasa. Elelo Ailasa, elelo, 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 elelo Ailasa, elelo. கடற்கரையில் வீடு கட்டி வாழுகின்ற மீனவர்கள் ஐலசா, 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 ஐலசா. கடற்கரையில் வீடு கட்டி வாழுகின்ற மீனவர்கள் ஐலசா, 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 ஐலசா. Elelo Ailasa, elelo, 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 elelo Ailasa, elelo. So that was a composition based on the syllables and the rhythm and the patterns used by the fishermen in south of India and in Sri Lanka. I'm now going to ask Sash to talk about her experiences in composing and writing this poem based on fishing, because it's a completely different one, and I learned a lot as well. Sash.
Well, I did a lot of research, obviously, to look at and listen to a lot of fishing songs like Supriya, and the refrain, Yelelo Ailasa, was common to almost all the songs. So I wrote something which is not a poem, it's more song-based, using that refrain, which I then handed over to Supriya, and then Supriya went off and composed something around those refrains. But then I carried on doing some more research, and I came across this phenomenon in the east of Sri Lanka, in this region called Batticaloa, where there are fish that sing. And it's a great tourist attraction, and people go to listen to these fish. And they were recorded, I think the Dutch sailors in the 17th century were the first people to record this phenomenon. And people have always wanted to hear them. And they're quite elusive. They only appear on a moonlit night, and they only congregate under this one bridge. So after doing a bit of writing for Supriya, I then went off in a bit of a direction of my own. And I wanted to write about these singing fish. And also the fact that in the 30 years of the Civil War, the Sri Lankan government had taken over this bridge where the fish gather. And they wouldn't allow the fishermen to fish on the lagoon or the people who lived in the area to come anywhere near the bridge. So for 30 years, no one heard the fish sing. And that intrigued me. So I wrote this piece in response to that. Come, let us go where the singing fish gather, on a moonlit night under the Kaladi Bridge. First one begins and is joined by another, a love song beckoning on the lagoon's ridge. The songs that drift across the lagoon slowly, that rise in the air to kiss the moonlight, guide the fisherman fishing on the waters, mingle with his breath, and break open the night. For 30 years, the fish were strangely silent, shut their eyes and their gills and refused to sing. They disappeared like the thousands held at gunpoint in a land overcome with blood and tears. Come, let us go where the singing fish gather, in the waters under the Kaladi Bridge. There they sing their bright songs of tomorrow, their love songs beckoning on the lagoon's ridge. The next work song that we looked at was a pounding song. Often women use quite large pestles and mortars to pound rice and spices as well, but really I was thinking of rice pounding songs. And they exist as a genre across India and Sri Lanka and also places like Nepal and Myanmar and Tibet. And China, so anywhere with a great a big agrarian society where traditional skills are still used in the home. So we were thinking that we talked quite a lot about our memories of watching women pound. It's such a dexterous and rhythmic activity. And these women can pound for hours, and as they pound, they gossip, and they talk, and they set the world to right. And so I wanted to reflect that in the piece that I wrote for Supriya.
It was absolutely wonderful to have those conversations because it brought back memories of my childhood where I watched all the women from the local area come together to pound rice. Well, are they pounding rice or are they pounding something else? But that's a different thing because there was a lot of gossip going on during the pounding. It was talking about, their own comparisons to like, I have a better sari, you have better this, all those things. But also about, the gossip about that particular, young man or husband who had a roving eye and was looking at other women and they had spotted that. And it was all those interesting conversations happening. And as a child, it was really fascinating to actually see this side of your mother and your aunt and your grandmother. And, and they did it because it was a good exercise as well. They could have easily, bought ready-made powders from the shops, but they liked to do it. And the pestle and mortar were huge and it was made of iron, and as they pounded, they were sharing these stories, which were all really interesting. So all those memories came flooding back, and memories of songs that I had heard, which when growing up in Mumbai, I was familiar with the language Marathi, so I heard these songs in Marathi as well as in Tamil. So it was good thing to actually look at rice pounding as an occupation and see what could happen. And we also discussed the story of Kannagi, didn't we? With that,
we did, yeah.
Do you want to tell a little bit about that as well?
Yeah, in one of the Tamil epics called Chillapathikaram, which means ankle bracelet, it's a story of these legendary lovers called Kannagi and Kovalan. Kovalan's a very wealthy merchant, and Kannagi is meant to be the epitome of everything that's perfect in a woman. And Tamil women, even to this day, are held up to this ideal of living like Kannagi. Because Kovalan one day decided to fall in love with a temple dancer and chased after her and abandoned his wife and lost all his money and eventually came back begging for forgiveness, and Kannagi forgives him. And the lesson that's taught to most children, Tamil children now, is that it's the chastity of Kannagi that cancels her husband's wrongdoings. In spite of that, roaming Romeos are called Kovalans in Tamil society, and I've referenced that in this piece. But another actually interesting aspect that we discovered was that classical Tamil literature, which a lot of these songs are linked to, was high literature, was written in the court for the king and the courtiers, written by men, although there were 4 very prominent female writers, written by men to be read by men. It was a space that wasn't allowed. Women weren't allowed in this space. And when we transpose that to work songs where women are working and singing and reciting poetry, we sort of felt as we were giving these marginalized voices a bit of an airing as well, which resonated with us, I think.
Totally. I absolutely love the colloquial terms that Sash has used in this poetry as well. Dingri dingale, tangame tingale. And I mean, these terms are, for those of you who know a little bit about Tamil or who know a little bit about India, you'll understand that these are terms that are rarely used. And for those of you watching for who it's completely new, these are strange words, but they sort of sit beautifully within the poem. And so, I absolutely loved reading the poem. And I was tempted to set it to music, but then I decided to leave that because the poetry read beautifully just as a poem. So I asked Sash if I could just participate in the reading rather than making it into a music piece. And that's worked out beautifully, especially with Mark supporting us on the percussion today as well. So shall we read the poem now,
Yeah.
Sash?
Yeah.
Okay.
One hand, then another.
Dingiri dingale, Meenakshi, dingiri dingale.
One woman, then another.
Tangame tillale, Meenakshi, tangame tillale.
Up and down, pounding the rice in the Ural, pounding the rice to a regular beat.
Dingiri dingale, Meenakshi, dingiri dingale.
My husband has become a Kovalan.
Dingiri dingale, Meenakshi, dingiri dingale.
Roams the town chasing women.
Tangame tillale, Meenakshi, tangame tillale.
Ayo, what are you to do? What can a woman do? What can a woman do? Stay at home, pound the rice, wait for him to finish his roaming.
Tangame tillale, Meenakshi, tangame tillale.
My husband has taken to drink.
Dingiri dingale, Meenakshi, dingiri dingale.
All day long, his breath reeks of toddy.
Tangame tillale, Meenakshi, tangame tillale.
Ayo, what are you to do? What can a woman do? What can a woman do? Cook his food, bear his children, clean the mess once he beats me.
Tangame tillale, Meenakshi, tangame tillale.
My husband disappeared years ago.
Dingiri dingale, Meenakshi, dingiri dingale.
Left one day to go to work.
Tangame tillale, Meenakshi, tangame tillale.
Ayo, what are you to do? What can a woman do? What can a woman do? Stand on the street, holding his photo, wait for him to be returned to me.
Tangame tillale, Meenakshi, tangame tillale. Tangame tillale, Meenakshi, tangame tillale. That was Mark expertly pounding the rice with those wonderful percussion instruments. That's okay, Mark. And that was the use of colloquial terms that we rarely hear these days. So, beautiful poem from Sash. And so I actually, listening to Sash, after Sash had composed this, I listened to what Sash had done, and I was reminded of a song that I had heard as a child. And that goes a little bit like this, and it's set in the language Marathi. Airanitsa deva tula tiningi tiningi vahude abalagat maya tuji amavari labude abalagat maya tuji amavari labude. Airanitsa deva tula tiningi tiningi vahude abalagat maya tuji amavari labude. Bude. So that was a song that I listened to, and I felt that it had a resonance with the whole sound of pounding and the rhythmic movement. And although that particular song is set in rural Maharashtra, and a lady is trying to manage her housework and put her child to sleep, so it was managing these two tasks. So she was doing that kind of a rhythmic balance. But that song resonated with the idea of creating a new song for pounding the rice. And I actually have a tiny snippet of another song that I created for this purpose. So we can have a look at that. So that was a snippet of a song that I thought of, and I'm still in the process of making a much bigger song, but that was a snippet of what I had done. But one of the other influences, the word Ponnutai, came from one of the practices that I was appalled at in South India a few years ago. I mean, this is probably going back even 10 years ago. I came across a practice in very rural India where the craving for male children is really strong. So if you had a female child, if you're there is infanticide. So there's a particular shrub, the oleander shrub, that produces seeds that the midwives actually feed female children. So they don't survive, and it's only the male children that survive and go on to farm the land. Partly that could be because of the dire circumstances the farming industry is in, and that continues till today. But also that whole message was really poignant. Being a woman myself, it was, if I could, do something to highlight that. I mean, I've done some work behind the scenes to help that thought process, educate and help that thought process move on, hopefully having an impact. But Ponnutai is a character or a woman depicted again in another film that spoke about this very difficult topic of female infanticide. And there was a beautiful song in that film that inspired me, which goes a little bit like this. போராளே பொன்னு தாயி போகிற போக்கில் மனச தொட்டு அருவாங்க கோல விக்கப்பட்டு நாரணானா போராளே பொன்னு தாயி போகிற போக்கில் மனச தொட்டு. So basically saying, this is Ponnutai walking along and touching hearts. So I really like the song, I like the name, so that's gone into the composition. And then there was this whole story that Sash and I discussed about Kannagi and Kovalan and his infidelity. So all that is coming together. This is still work in progress. The song is to be composed in full and we need to put the music to it. But this is just a little bit of a glimpse of pounding the rice. So the next occupation we looked at was paddy fields, planting the paddy. And paddy, as we discussed before, rice is the sort of main crop of South India. And planting the paddy is seasonal. And everybody in the village goes to work. And what happens is that the women leave their children on sling cradles on trees, and they go and work in the fields. And they sing to the children. And the children are very rested. They are very happy, peaceful, they are rested, the women are singing. And I came across this, and that actually was a turning point in my musical career, because I came across this scene in 2014-15 as I was visiting Tamil Nadu, and I created the Lullaby Project, because for me the whole connection between the mother's voice and the child and the infant, that really resonated. So paddy fields has a huge sort of role to play in my current musical repertoire. The Lullaby Sonic Cradle is still a touring production, and we have been touring it for 5 years, and it's always touched people's hearts, and we are touring it later this year as well. But I thought I'll share a little bit of a snippet of the colloquial terms that are used when a lullaby is sung in South India. They are very typical to the language Tamil as well. So, araro, ariraro is a very common syllable used as you rock your child to sleep. I've done that with my children as well. So part of this whole resonance experience has been learning something new all along the way. And one of the things that I learned was through this poem that Sash has written, as far as the paddy planting occupation goes. Completely different experience to me. I'm talking to you about lullaby and the gentle movement and the breeze and the women planting. And Sash has a completely different perspective, and I learned a lot from that as well. And, I let Sash discuss that and read the poem. But it's quite an important discovery as part of this project.
One of the interesting ways society in Tamil Sri Lanka has changed since the end of the war is that almost 90% of households now are run by single females, whether they're old or young, because so many people have been killed. And so when we did the paddy planting songs, Supriya was really taken with the sounds of words, but also sounds of names. And that was something that came across in our discussion with the rice pounding song, and I thought I'd take that through to this piece. And so I've got a list of names of women who now are out in a row planting paddy. But what's different about these women to the women in Tamil Nadu in India is that they all have different strengths or different expertise which aren't used anymore because society has broken down to such an extent in Sri Lanka. So this is about the war orphans, war widows, females really who are having to work and bring up either younger siblings or care for people in the community and their paddy planting. Bending together in a long straight line, the women are planting the paddy crop. Tiny bundles holding an infinity of promise. Lord Indran, bring forth a blessed harvest. This is Rukmani. She is a grandmother without any grandchildren, a mother without a son. This is Thangama. She is a wife without a husband, a widow with no body to cremate. This is Rupa. She is a sister without a brother, a daughter bereft of parents. This is Nirmala. She is a child without any playthings, a girl whose tears fall in silence. This is Niranjani. She is a fighter without any weapons, a leopard without any claws. This is Rabini. She's a teacher without a school building, an educator with no one to instruct. This is Jnanodhini. She is a musician without any music, a singer without any song. This is Raja Lakshmi. She is a dancer without any movement, a storyteller bearing an untellable tale. Bending together in a long straight line, the women are planting the paddy crop. Tiny bundles holding an infinity of promise. Lord Indran, bring forth a blessed harvest.
So that was a little bit about what Sash and myself did in the residency. We talked a lot, we conferred, gained knowledge about each other's thought process. So the composition work for me has just begun, and I'm hoping the project will have legs and do things grow. And I had the idea of creating the 3 podcasts came because we had to share the process. We had to share what we spoke about and how it all happened. And what were the little things we did. So the podcasts are all about the process rather than the final products. We hope you get to hear them shortly. And helping us with the podcast, apart from Mark on the percussion, was Karen Deflaet, my good friend, flautist from Belgium, who of course couldn't come and record in the studio or anything. We did everything remotely. And it was mixed and mastered, and all the sounds that were added were done by Duncan Chapman, who's a sound artist based in Lincolnshire and with whom we work on a number of projects. I work on a number of projects. So that was a little bit about the residency and the opportunity that we had to delve into Tamil and delve into heritage and delve into poetry and song and even wonderful percussion.
It's been a pleasure.
So I am now going to invite our viewers and listeners to ask us questions and ask if Tanda wants to ask us questions as well. So over to you, Tanda. Of course it does.
That was amazing. 1, 1, 2, 1, 2. Siyavivinya kunya kubili. Is it working?
Yes.
Brilliant. I naturally have a very loud voice. I have to check.
Beautiful voice.
Look who's talking. That was so incredible. It was so beautiful. And again, I'd like to echo what Supriya has said. If anyone at home has any questions they'd like to ask, please feel free. You can just pop them down here in the comments and we'll be very happy. I'll be very happy to relay them to this amazing group of people. And I'll also it's a first come, first serve basis, so we have a limited time to do this. And I'll just kick things off with a few that I've sort of put over here. I'll be switching between these screens. If I miss anything, I am sorry, but I'll do my best to keep flicking through the screen so that no one misses anything. So, how are you feeling after the performance?
It was good. It was really good, yes.
Relieved.
Well, and relief indeed.
Enlightened. I feel like I've learned a lot just listening to the performance, because today I turned up not really having much of a clue what we were going to do. But we had a synopsis.
Yes,
So
yes.
it was really nice to actually just sit and enjoy the performance, when I wasn't part of it.
Yeah. That actually brings me to my first question on here. I understand that the inspiration came when you visited the temple
Yes.
in Sri Lanka and you read the ancient script.
Yes.
Am I correct in saying that it's the same temple that is a UNESCO World Heritage Site?
Yes, the Srirangam temple in the Tiruchirappalli district is a UNESCO World Heritage Site, and it's a very large temple complex, and it has a number of smaller temples in that. And it's amazing. Just the architectural marvel the temple is quite a thing.
I mean, not right now because we want your eyes on us, but if you get a chance, just Google and put like images on it. It is a visual marvel. It is so beautiful.
It is.
And I think you've actually translated that sonically in such a beautiful way too. Like whenever you were singing, I couldn't get the images of the temple outside of my mind. That was really beautiful.
Wow, thank you.
I guess one of the things that I wanted to ask, as you were saying that you were not sure how it was going to go, what it was going to look like. I mean, I understand how the concept started. As Supriya mentioned earlier on, she saw the inscriptions of the ancient Tamil text on the walls. But I'm curious about how you managed to work together, given the pandemic, the status quo that we have right now, restrictions on how we work, certain things outdoors, many things having to be digital, etc. So how did you find the experience to be from last year till now, collaborating together?
I think we'll both be able to answer that. But from right from the outset, it was an exchange. So it was an exchange of information, an exchange of ideas, And then after we had sort of done some of the legwork, it was an exchange of the musical pieces. For example, we recorded the voice on the podcast and sent it to Karen and Duncan and Mark then put the percussion on top. And it was all done remotely. So it's bizarre how we have all repurposed the way we work.
Yeah.
And I think some of it is here to stay because it is actually quite convenient not to have to travel long distances to do certain things, although we enjoy it. But we have repurposed our work, and it, I think, worked. From my point of view, it worked brilliantly to do it digitally as well. Nothing beats sitting in a room and devising something. You just have that banter. But what would you say, Sash? Would you say that's true?
I think the record function on Zoom is a godsend, really.
So record session. So free advertisements for Zoom, free recording things on Zoom. Brilliant. If it's okay, I might ask you just to inch a little bit closer to your microphone.
Yes,
There,
yeah,
we want to hear that beautiful voice. That's amazing. So you find that some of the things, although they were an adaptation of the circumstances, you're going to keep some of those things in working together.
Definitely. I think, yes, we will. Like I said, I'm hoping the project will grow. I'm wanting to grow the project in terms of exploring it further, deeper, as well as exploring further occupations as well, and working with Sash and Mark and Karen and Duncan. So if that happens, then we may do some of it remotely and some of it in person. So definitely mixed working practice.
If I can just throw in 10 seconds, I understand there are only 3 of you here today, but there were other collaborators. So you've mentioned Duncan. So is it okay just to quickly explain what the role of the other people was?
Sure. The 2 other people who are not here today are Duncan Chapman, who's a sound artist. Yeah. So Duncan mixed, mastered the podcasts for us, as well as he added soundscape. So he added sounds as fitting. For example, I've mentioned the Radio 4 broadcast, fishing broadcast. Yeah. And he picked pieces of that Kadalose FM fishing broadcast. So he picked all that and he's added it into the soundscape of the podcast. And so that was his role. So he did that and mixed and mastered the podcast as well. Karen lent instrumental flute support. So just like Mark's lent percussion support, Karen is based in Belgium. So obviously traveling to the UK was not a non-starter of an idea. She would love to, and she's done a lot of work with us, but unfortunately. And so she lent the flute support. So any instrumental sounds, the musical sounds support, she was the artist.
The interesting thing about that as well is I haven't heard what Karen's done yet either.
Yes.
So, we're kind of left to our own devices, which is nice. It was really creative and free, but I mean, ultimately, Supriya and Duncan will organise it all and make it work and make sense.
I'm going to throw in 2 things on top of what you've just said about the creative freedom. So just to follow up on what you've said, so I'm guessing that is the next step for the project, the podcast. It seems to be a big factor into this. Just a quick one. So this is a twofold question. I'm going to go into that creative freedom. The first one is, when would it be ready and how can people access it if they want to hear the podcast?
The podcasts are ready now. So
Ready
They're ready now. Sash and Mark haven't heard it because they were literally ready yesterday morning. So
Wow.
we're just finalizing. So it's ready now, and I will be submitting the podcast to Opera North, who will be putting it out on channels that are suitable, and we will be promoting it as well as Opera North will be. So you'll definitely get to hear of it, Tanda, and maybe you will definitely get to hear it as well.
So if you're not signed up to the Opera North newsletter, please do sign up, subscribe to the YouTube page, and we'll keep you posted. So the other one, really quickly, I know I'm so conscious of time. The other one you were mentioning about creative freedom. Now, I was really curious even about the choice of the entire collaboration and setup. Is that, for instance, if there was keys, if there was a keyboard, for instance, you'd only be constrained to only the 12 notes of the chromatic scale in Western music. And so you're talking about creative freedoms, etc. Does the omission of things like keys and having percussion and poetry and voice, did it give you any freedom in terms of being able to access notes that are not available in this type of general music?
I think that is my practice in the main. I like to be a little bit experimental in my approach, and I've done a number of projects where I haven't followed that traditional path of following a key or having a set composition piece in a set way as expected. So I like to have that difference, and I think it is about improving. I wouldn't say improving, it's about a different set of listening skills. So when I came into the country, I had no such listening skill. I only knew my music, I knew classical Indian music, I knew film music from India, I knew India. But I didn't know the UK, I didn't know the world as much as I do now. So I have learned to listen differently, and I think all my practice is about encouraging listeners to listen differently to what is going on. So in this particular collaboration, it was about how do we involve different artists and keep the creative process open, as well as encourage whoever is listening in to keep all the preconceived ideas outside the room and come in and just listen and take away whatever they want to. Of course, it is not, virtuoso musical concert in motion. It's more of a thought process in motion. It's a thought process in composition. And perhaps the final product will definitely have some,
But I hope it does retain that authenticity, because it's such a freedom. In Western music, you find that 7 white notes, 5 black notes, only 12 notes. So to be able to access an option choosing from 24, it's like saying 26 letters of the English language and being able to access double that. It's amazing. So maybe a final question. I'm just going to throw it to you, Shash, if that's okay. I was worried that how is it going to fit, because obviously as a poet you could be confined to poetic meter, whether something is iambic or trochee, etc. And now you are juggling these two different styles, ancient Tamil and then also writing in English, which the vowels and the sounds and the syllables will confine you to that, and you also have to think about rhythm over there. How do you sort of let's say in less than 30 seconds?
Well, I didn't write poetry. I think that's quite obvious. It wasn't poetry. It wasn't song either. But it was somewhere in the middle, where rhythm was very, very important. And it wouldn't work without the rhythm. The words would be flat. So it wouldn't, without this setting, what I've written would be rubbish.
No, I mean, I think that is like an unfair representation of it, because lyrics are literally poems written to music. So to find that balance between being free of that, maybe I would see it as free form in a way rather than rubbish. It was exceptional, and how it worked together was amazing. I hope I've not missed anything. If there are any additional questions, I'm sure this will still be available online. Put them on the comments, and we'll be able to catch up with you another time. Right now, I know that you have to run at 4:30. So I'm going to leave it here. Are there any other final comments from you guys? Anything I've missed out that you'd like to say?
No, just to say thank you to you.
Thank you.
I haven't done anything. Like an amazing team behind me right here. Shout out to Opera North. I just came as a guest and just introduced people. The hard work was here. You guys have been here since morning, so that's incredible. Any last words? Any pearls of wisdom? Any jokes? Any comments?
Thank you. Just
going
thank you
once?
very much to Opera North, to Catherine and Jamie. It's just been a real pleasure. So thank you very much.
Jamie and Catherine are the people behind the cameras who are actually doing much more work than myself right now. So really, again, ladies and gentlemen, please give a warm shout out, react, likes to Supriya, to Shash, and to Mark. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.